Amara walked into her math class, clutching the graded final exam in her hand. She had earned a perfect score, something she worked tirelessly for, but the moment she stepped inside, the air felt heavier than usual. The murmurs began almost immediately. "Did you see that?" "She got another 100, one student whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yeah, but how?" another replied with a smirk. Amara's chest tightened as she slid into her seat. She knew what they were, implying that someone like her couldn't possibly achieve this on her own. It wasn't the first time she'd heard whispers like these, but today they stung more than ever. Chloe Whitaker leaned back in her chair at the front of the room, twirling a pen between her fingers. "Oh, come on, Amara," she said mockingly, her voice carrying across the classroom. "You really expect us to believe you didn't cheat? No one gets perfect scores unless—" Her words trailed off, but her meaning was clear. The teacher, Mr. Caldwell, looked up from his desk. "Is there something going on here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already assumed the worst about Amara. Amara stood abruptly, gripping the edges of her desk. "I didn't cheat," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I studied for weeks. You can check my notes if you want." But before anyone could respond, Principal Henshaw strode into the room. His presence silenced the chatter instantly. He glanced around the room, then focused on Amara. "Miss Okoye, I understand there's been an accusation against you regarding the final exam." "It's not true," Amara insisted, stepping forward. "I didn't do anything wrong. I worked hard for this grade." Henshaw waved a dismissive hand. "We'll have to investigate further, of course. Until then, consider yourself suspended. Pending review." The weight of his words hit Amara like a punch to the gut. Suspended? Over something she didn't even do? She thought of MIT, the dream she'd chased since she was a little girl, and felt panic rising in her throat. Without her scholarship, she wouldn't be able to attend. Everything she'd worked for would disappear in an instant. As the reality sank in, memories flooded back. All the times teachers had praised her for being articulate, as though it were surprising. The countless occasions when classmates questioned whether she wrote her own essays. The study groups she was never invited to join. Each memory added another layer of frustration and hurt until it became unbearable. "You don't belong here," Chloe sneered under her breath as Amara gathered her things. "You're only here because of affirmative action." Amara froze, her hands trembling. She wanted to scream, to tell Chloe exactly what she thought of her cruel words, but instead, she forced herself to stay calm. Mia Patel, Amara's best friend, sat quietly nearby, avoiding eye contact. Amara noticed and felt a pang of betrayal. Was Mia involved somehow? Had she shared Amara's notes with Chloe? The thought made her stomach churn. Just as Amara reached the door, Chloe called out, "Enjoy your last week here, Amara." The hallway outside was eerily quiet. Amara leaned against the lockers, trying to steady her breathing. Her fists clenched at her sides as anger mixed with determination. They thought they could break her, but they had no idea who she really was. "I won't let them win," she muttered to herself. "Not just for me. For everyone who feels invisible because of people like them." With that vow echoing in her mind, Amara straightened up and walked toward the library. She needed a plan, and she needed allies. Whatever it took, she would prove her innocence, and maybe, just maybe, change the system along the way. Amara sat in her history class, trying to focus on the lecture, but the whispers around her made it impossible. She could feel eyes boring into her back as Mr. Caldwell paused mid-sentence and turned to address the room. "Miss Okoye," he said, his tone laced with skepticism. "Can you explain how you managed such a high score on this assignment?" The question hung heavy in the air. Amara clenched her jaw. "I studied," she replied simply, keeping her voice steady despite the frustration bubbling inside her. A boy in the corner snickered. "Yeah, right. Like anyone actually believes that." Others joined in, their laughter sharp and biting. She probably had help, someone muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. You know, affirmative action or something. Amara's hands trembled under the desk. She wanted to shout at them, to demand they stop making assumptions about her life, her work, her worth, but she knew it wouldn't matter. They'd never believe her. Later that day, Amara found herself digging through old school records in the library. She had overheard two teachers talking about past disciplinary actions and decided to investigate further. What she discovered made her blood boil. White students accused of cheating had been given slaps on the wrist, warnings, detentions, maybe a call home. But here she was, facing expulsion for the same accusation. "This isn't fair," she whispered, to herself, staring at the damning evidence spread across the table. Her phone buzzed, pulling her attention away. It was Mia, her best friend, or so she thought. Amara hesitated before answering. "Hey," Mia began nervously. "Look, I need to tell you something." Amara's stomach dropped. "What is it?" "I gave Chloe your notes," Mia admitted, quickly, her words tumbling out. "She pressured me, okay? She said if I didn't give them to her, she'd make sure no one talked to me ever again." Amara felt like the floor had been ripped out from beneath her feet. "You did what?" Her voice cracked, equal parts anger and hurt. "I'm sorry," Mia pleaded. "I didn't think it would go this far. I swear, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But Amara couldn't respond. She ended the call, feeling more alone than ever. How could Mia betray her like this? Who else was supposed to have her back? At home that evening, Amara tried to talk to her mother about everything. The rumors, the unfair treatment, the betrayal. But her mom just sighed wearily. "Maybe this school isn't for us," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to move on." Those words hit harder than anything else. Move on? Give up? After everything she'd worked for? Doubts crept in as Amara lay awake that night. Was it even worth fighting anymore? No one believed her. Not her. Teachers, not her peers, not even her own family. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong there. The next afternoon, Amara stayed late in an empty classroom surrounded by textbooks and crumpled drafts of assignments. She stared at the clock ticking on the wall, wondering if she'd ever escape the shadow of prejudice that followed her everywhere. Just as she was packing up to leave, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. "Amara Okoye," a woman's voice asked when she answered cautiously. "This is Elena Torres. I'm a journalist, and I've heard some troubling things about what's happening at Crestwood." Amara froze. "How do you know about that?" "There are whispers. Online," Elena explained. "People are starting to notice the double standards at your school. If you're willing to share your story, it could shine a light on the bigger issues at play here." For the first time in days, hope flickered inside Amara, but it came with a cost. "If I go public," she said slowly, "what happens to me? To my future?" Elena didn't sugarcoat it. "It won't be easy. You'll face backlash, scrutiny, maybe even threats. But staying silent means letting injustice win. The choice is yours." Amara hung up and sat in silence, weighing her options. Protect herself and let the system crush her, or risk everything to expose the truth and inspire change. By the time she left the classroom, her decision was clear. She texted Elena, "Let's do this." As she walked home, determination replaced despair. For the first time in weeks, Amara felt like she had power, not just over her own fate but over the system that tried to break her, and she wasn't going down without a fight. Amara stood outside the auditorium doors, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the murmurs of the crowd inside. She took a deep breath and pushed them open. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Parents in suits, teachers with crossed arms, board members scribbling notes. Many looked at her not with curiosity but with judgment. their faces already made up. Chloe Whitaker sat near the front, flanked by her father, whose tailored suit screamed wealth and influence. Chloe smirked, leaning back in her chair like this. Was just another day where she'd get away with whatever she wanted. Amara felt a surge of anger but forced herself to stay calm. This wasn't about Chloe anymore. It was bigger than that. When the principal called her name, Amara stepped forward, her legs trembling slightly under the weight of everyone's stares. She gripped the edges of the podium and began speaking, her voice steady despite the nerves clawing at her chest. "I didn't cheat," she said firmly. "I worked hard for my grades, but no matter how much I prove myself, people refuse to see me for who I am because of the color of my skin." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment there was silence. Then someone coughed, breaking the tension. A teacher muttered something about emotional appeals, but Amara ignored it. She pulled out a folder filled with emails she had uncovered during her investigation. "These are emails from Crestwood's internal system," she explained, holding them up for everyone to see. "They show that Chloe plagiarized essays multiple times, and yet nothing was ever done about it. Meanwhile, students like me are punished without proof." Gasps rippled through the room. Faculty members exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they were complicit in protecting Chloe while punishing others unfairly. Chloe's smirk faltered, her confidence wavering for the first time. But Amara wasn't. "Are finished?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device, a recorder. "There's more," she said, pressing play. The recording crackled to life, and Chloe's voice filled the room. "You think anyone cares if you're innocent? No one will believe you over me. Just admit it, Amara. You cheated." The room erupted in chaos. Parents whispered furiously. Teachers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and the board members stared at each other, unsure what to do next. Chloe's face went pale as the realization hit her. She'd been caught. "No!" Chloe shouted, jumping to her feet. "That's fake! You edited it!" "It's real!" Amara shot back, her voice cutting through the noise. "And now everyone knows exactly who you are." Chloe collapsed into her seat, tears streaming down her face. Her father tried to intervene, shouting about slander and false accusations, but even he couldn't deny the evidence. Finally, Chloe broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please," she begged, turning to the disciplinary board. "I'll do anything. Just don't expel me." The room fell silent again, the weight of the moment settling over everyone. Amara stepped closer to the microphone, her hands steady now. "This isn't just about me or Chloe," she said, her voice ringing clear and strong. "It's about a system that protects privilege and punishes those who don't fit in. It's about teachers who doubt us before they even know us, and schools that value money over fairness. I'm standing here today not just to defend myself, but to fight for every student who feels unseen, unheard, and unworthy because of the color of their skin." Her words echoed through the auditorium, leaving an eerie stillness in their wake. Some people nodded slowly, others wiped away tears, and a few looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Finally, the head of the disciplinary board cleared his throat. "After reviewing the evidence presented today," he announced, "we have decided to expel Chloe Whitaker effective immediately. Additionally, we will launch an investigation into systemic issues within Crestwood." Relief washed over Amara, but it wasn't sweet. It was earned. As the meeting adjourned, she walked out of the auditorium with her head held high, ignoring the whispers around her. Outside, a group of students waited for her. When they saw her emerge, they erupted in. "Cheers! You did it, Amara!" one of them shouted. Others joined in, clapping and chanting her name. For the first time, Amara felt truly seen. Not as someone who didn't belong, but as someone who had fought back and won. As she looked at the smiling faces surrounding her, she realized this wasn't just her victory. It was theirs too. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something bigger. The disciplinary board's announcement echoed through the auditorium. Chloe Whitaker was expelled, and Crestwood would launch an investigation into systemic discrimination. The decision brought a mix of relief and frustration for Amara. Justice had been served in one sense, but she knew this was only the beginning. Expelling one student wouldn't fix years of inequality baked into the school's foundation. As students poured out of the auditorium, whispers spread like wildfire. Marginalized students who had always felt invisible now approached Amara with hesitant smiles and quiet words of gratitude. "You really stood up to them," said one girl, her voice trembling. "I've been so scared to speak out about how I'm treated here." Amara nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "You don't have to be scared anymore," she replied softly. "We're stronger together." Word traveled fast, and by the end of the day a group of students had gathered. In the library, they sat in a circle, sharing stories of microaggressions, unfair treatment, and moments when they'd doubted their place at Crestwood. For the first time, these students didn't feel alone. They saw themselves in each other. "I never thought I'd see something like this happen here," said a boy named Marcus, shaking his head. "But if we stick together, maybe things can change." Amara listened intently, her heart swelling with hope. She realized that her fight wasn't just personal anymore. It had sparked something bigger. These students weren't just followers. They were allies, ready to demand accountability and push for real change. That evening, as Amara sat at home going over notes for the next steps, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Hey, sis, we need to talk." Her stomach dropped. Sis? No one called her that except... Before she could respond, another message came through. "It's Darius. I know what happened today, and I want to explain." Amara stared at the screen, her mind racing. Darius. Her older brother who had disappeared years ago after getting tangled up in trouble with hacking. Their parents barely spoke his name anymore. What could he possibly have to say now? Against her better judgment, she called him back. When he answered, his voice was low and cautious. "Look, I know I messed up," he began. "Leaving you guys, like that. It wasn't fair, but I did it because I didn't want my mistakes to hurt Mom and Dad. Or you." Amara clenched her jaw. "Then why are you reaching out now?" There was a pause before he spoke again. "Because I helped you. With the emails and the recording. I couldn't sit back and watch them destroy your future without doing something." Shock rippled through her. "What?" "It's true," Darius admitted. "I hacked into Crestwood months ago. I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed to fight back if things got bad. I wanted to protect you this time." Tears welled in Amara's eyes as conflicting emotions swirled inside her. Anger, confusion, gratitude, all battling for space. "You should have told me," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I know," Darius replied, "and I'm sorry, but I'm here now. If you'll let me, I want to help. Not just with this, but with whatever comes next." For a long moment, Amara didn't respond. Then she took a deep breath. "Okay," she said quietly. "We do this together." When they met the next day, the tension between them was palpable, but so was the potential for healing. Darius explained how he'd used his skills to uncover evidence against Chloe and expose the school's biases. Amara listened, slowly realizing that having her brother back wasn't just about family. It was about building a stronger team to fight injustice. By the end of their conversation, she felt lighter, more hopeful. Together, they mapped out a plan to keep pushing for accountability at Crestwood, not just for Amara, but for every student who deserved better. A few days later, Amara faced another decision, whether to accept offers from other schools or stay at Crestwood. Her mother urged her to leave, warning her that staying would mean facing even more hostility. But Amara shook her head. "If I leave, nothing changes," she said firmly. "I'm staying, not because I have to, but because I want to. This is where the fight needs to happen." Her resolve inspired others. Students began organizing meetings, drafting petitions, and demanding transparency from the administration. Slowly but surely, small victories emerged. Teachers started acknowledging their biases. Study groups became more inclusive. Even some parents joined the cause, pressuring the school to follow through on its promises. On the last day of the semester, Amara stood in front of a crowd of cheering classmates during an assembly. Her voice carried strength and conviction as she addressed the room. "They thought I was weak," she declared, meeting the gaze of every person watching. "They thought I'd stay silent, but now they know better." Applause erupted, filling the auditorium with energy and hope. As Amara stepped down from the stage, she felt a sense of purpose she'd never known before. Change wouldn't come overnight, but it was coming, and Amara intended to lead the way. One step at a time, Crestwood was becoming a different kind of school. A better one. And for the first time, Amara truly believed she belonged there. Have you ever faced discrimination like Amara? If her story resonated with you, we want to hear from you. Share your experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters, and it could inspire someone else who feels unseen or unheard. If you loved this powerful, twist-filled narrative, don't miss what's coming next. Our next episode dives into another gripping tale. The Cop Who Laughed, Then Lost Everything. It's a story about justice, accountability, and the courage to stand up when no one else will. Help us spread awareness by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Every action you take brings attention to these important issues and helps amplify stories that challenge injustice and spark change. Together, we can make a difference. Every voice counts. Let's keep fighting racism and inequality one story at a time. Be part of the movement. Comment, share, and stay tuned for more.